What's up? Today I want to take you step by step through the process of creating this cool animation in Blender. If you're curious about this and other related topics, be sure to check out my channel regularly. Let's get started. Alright, so I've got Blender open to the General 3D Modeling viewport, and I've got my default cube here. I'm going to go ahead to delete just the cube, and Shift A to add a mesh. I'll add a torus. I'm going to press 7 on the number pad to look directly down at my torus, and tab into edit mode so I can see my vertices. I want to go into wireframe view and select half of my mesh and dissolve my vertices. So now we have half of a torus. Now I want to add a subdivision surface modifier to make this a higher resolution and bump it up by 1. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and apply this modifier and then apply a solidify modifier. We first applied our subdivision surface modifier because this solidify now will be much more accurate. We can see if we look at the edge of our pipe, this is now a nice fine edge because we subdivided our surface. I'm going to play with my thickness a little bit. Something right about there. And now we can select our torus, right click, and shade smooth. So you can see it rounded off those edges nicely. Now I want to, with my torus selected, tab into edit mode, look at one of my edges, hold Alt, click, and it selects a loop. Now I'll press S on the keyboard to scale the loop. And if I press 3 on the number pad to look from the side, I'll now G to grab the loop and move it along the axis. I'm going to select my second loop, move it over a bit, and S to scale. Now if we look at our object, I'm actually going to apply my solidify modifier. Press R to rotate and Control so it snaps to the grid. And it's helpful that our object origin is still in the center of the scene. Now I want to Shift A to add a UV sphere. And I'll scale that object down and move it over so it just barely fits inside of our tube. Look down from the top with number 7 on the number pad. Now I want to subdivide that sphere, make it a little more high resolution. And now right click and shade smooth. Now we want to select the sphere, go to Object, and set Origin to our 3D cursor. So if we look at it with number 1 on the number pad, and we rotate about that origin, it goes perfectly through our torus. If you look at it with wireframe view, you can see it does indeed fit. Now I want to add a second torus. I'm going to add another Shift A to add a torus. Right away I'm going to look at it from the side with number 3 and rotate, holding Control. Look at it from the front with number 1 and tab into edit mode. Change it to wireframe, and I'm going to delete a good portion. Dissolve my vertices. Now I want to subdivide the surface first. I gave the other one 2. I'm going to apply. I'm going to add a different solidify amount. This will be a different material when we render it. And these edges I'm going to keep sharp for this rendering. And then this object selected. So we can see everything is set up around this one 3D cursor, 0, 0. Now we can begin to animate our scene if we look at the animation timeline down here, select my object in eye, location, rotation, and scale. Then I'll move my keyframe to 50 and rotate my sphere perfectly over 180 degrees. Now eye, location, rotation, and scale, keyframe. Now I'll move to 100 and rotate another perfect 180. Eye, location, rotation, and scale. Now you can see our sphere is going around in a perfect circle. And right now our sphere comes to a stop when it reaches our keyframes, so we just need to select our sphere, change our interpolation of our keyframes to linear. Now as our sphere loops around, it doesn't come to a stop at any of our keyframes, it moves at the same speed throughout the entire animation. Now let's set some materials. First, before we start to visualize our materials, we're going to change our render over to cycles. This render engine I'll be able to use with my GPU. And now I want to start applying, first I'll select my torus and apply a glass material. The default glass, I'm going to change it to multi-scatter. Give it maybe a pink color. And decrease the roughness. Before we can really see the effects of this glass material, let's Shift A to add a light. I'll be adding a spotlight. Look at it from the front, and G to grab. And now with the light selected, I want to really up its power to maybe 20,000. Now let's look through our camera here. We're going to camera to view and press 0 on the number pad. Increase my focal length of my camera. That looks all right there. So I'll uncheck to leave my camera in this location and press 0 to leave my viewport. Now let's create another different transparent material. I'll use glass again, but a different color. And now finally, a material for our UV sphere. With the UV sphere selected, go to New Material, and let's make this one emissive. I want more of a texture on this material. Into our color, let's add a Vernoy texture. Let's add another light source, so Shift D to duplicate our light, click, and then R to rotate. Let's place it underneath our scene. Take down the power of this light to 10,000. Let's change the background of our scene. So go into our role properties, the color, and drag it down to black. There we go. So you can see this is how it appears unrendered, and then in rendered view. I want to animate this other object as well. Let's look at it from the front and insert a keyframe. Drag it to 50 and rotate it. Insert a keyframe. There we go, that looks cool. So now we're good to render this scene. I'm going to go to my render properties and reduce my samples down to 3000 just to save a little bit of time. I'm going to add a motion blur so that light looks a little bit more glow, the emissive factor. Now I'm going to change my output location and bump up my FPS to 60. So here I'm telling it to render from 0 to 100, and that's what I've got set up in my animation. So now we're set to render our model. Let's first save as to a good location, and now up to render animation. And you can see here it's starting at frame 0. It tells you the time it's taking, the time that's remaining, and it will be rendering up to frame 100. So there you go. Alright, here's the result of our efforts. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned something new. Be sure to check out some other videos on my channel for the same kind of content. I upload daily. See ya!